I can feel it watching me right now. Sitting here in the dark of this abandoned house, I swear I can sense something moving in the shadows, just beyond where the light from my phone reaches. I know I should leave. I've been here before, in places like this. But something about this time is different. It's stronger, more intense, and every inch of my skin is crawling. The hair on the back of my neck stands up as if waiting for something, anything, to happen. But let me rewind. My name's Tom Sutherland, and inspecting rundown properties is what I do. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Old houses that no one's bothered with in decades, those are my bread and butter. My job is to check if these rotting piles are worth salvaging or if they should be torn down for good. Sounds simple, right? Walk in, snap some pictures, make a report, get out. But what they don't tell you is that some places, some houses, they don't like being disturbed. It all started a few months ago with an old mansion on the edge of town. The place had been abandoned for decades, at least, that's what I'd been told. From the outside, it looked like every other forgotten property I'd inspected, windows boarded up, roof caving in, vines swallowing the front porch. But the moment I crossed the threshold, something felt wrong. The air was thick, like walking through molasses. I remember thinking how strange it was that the place could feel so alive when it had been empty for so long. I brushed it off at first. It was my first real assignment, and I figured I was just letting my nerves get to me. I mean, who wouldn't be creeped out by a place like that? But the further I walked into the house, the worse it got. There was this sensation, like I wasn't alone. Like someone, or something, was watching me. I could feel it, trailing behind me as I moved from room to room. Then I got to the second floor. There was a room at the end of the hallway, the door slightly ajar. It didn't feel right, but I was determined to finish the job. So, I did what I always do, I pushed it open. The room was dimly lit by the fading sunlight, casting long shadows across the dusty floor. And there, standing by the window, was a figure. Tall, lanky, and completely still. My heart stopped for a second. I thought maybe it was a squatter, someone trying to hide out in the old place. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. "You're not supposed to be here." The figure didn't move at first, but then, slowly, so damn slowly, it turned toward me. And that's when I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it. Where its face should have been, there was nothing. Just a blur, like someone had smeared paint across a canvas. No features, no eyes, nothing. My breath caught in my throat, and before I could even think, the thing was gone. Just gone. I ran out of that house so fast I nearly tripped over myself. My heart was pounding, my chest tight, like I'd just escaped something I wasn't supposed to see. I reported the place as infested with rats, made up some excuse to explain away what I'd experienced. But deep down, I knew. I'd seen something real. Something that shouldn't have been there. After that, the jobs kept coming. More houses, all on the outskirts of town. And every single one of them felt off. At first, it was just a weird feeling, like someone was watching me. But then I started seeing things, shadows darting out of the corner of my eye, figures in dark corners that disappeared the moment I looked directly at them. I tried to rationalize it, told myself it was just stress or my imagination playing tricks on me. But it kept happening. Over and over. And now, here I am. In this house, feeling that same thing again, only stronger this time. It's watching me, waiting for me to make a move. I don't know what it wants, but I can feel it getting closer. The shadows are shifting, creeping toward me like they're alive. My breath is coming in short, panic bursts. I should leave, but my legs won't move. I'm frozen, like I've been caught in a web I can't escape. Maybe this time, I won't be able to run. It was the woman in the attic that finally did it. Sitting here, trying to shake this feeling of being watched, I can't stop thinking about her. That day. That house. It's always that house that haunts me the most. I've seen a lot of strange things in these old places, but nothing like that. And I'm starting to think this, whatever's watching me now, is connected. Like it's all part of something bigger, something I don't understand. Something I might not survive. It was a small, two-story place, run down like most of the others I've inspected. Peeling paint, windows boarded up. On the surface, it looked no different from the dozens of other houses I'd walked through, houses that had long been forgotten, left to decay on the outskirts of town. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. That heavy, oppressive energy, like something was pushing down on me, making it hard to breathe. I tried to ignore it, like I always do. Just get the job done, take some pictures, make a report, and get out. But this place. It had a different feel. Like the air was thicker, darker. I walked through the first floor, my footsteps echoing in the empty rooms, but that sense of dread just kept growing. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind that rattled the old windows, it felt like the house was alive, like it was watching me. Waiting. The attic was the last place I had to check. The door was old, barely hanging on its hinges, and when I touched it, it groaned like it hadn't been opened in years. I pushed it open anyway, telling myself it was just another empty room. But the moment I stepped inside, I saw her. She was sitting in the corner, her back to me. A woman, hunched over, dressed in filthy, torn rags. Her hair was a tangled mess, matted and greasy, and she was sobbing, deep, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. I froze. For a second, I thought she might be homeless, maybe squatting in the house, but something about her was wrong. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt this cold, paralyzing fear wash over me. "Ma'am?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. She just kept crying, her shoulders shaking with each breath. I took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. Every instinct in me screamed to leave, but I couldn't. Something was keeping me there, like I needed to understand what was happening. Like I had to know. "Ma'am?" I said again, louder this time, my hand reaching out toward her. I was close now, just a few feet away, and that's when it happened. She let out this scream, this blood-curdling, soul-piercing scream that shook the entire house. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before, like all the pain and anger in the world had been compressed into that one sound. The walls shook, dust rained down from the rafters, and I stumbled back, my heart nearly jumping out of my chest. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I blinked, and she was gone. The attic was empty. Completely, impossibly empty. I didn't stick around to find out what the hell had just happened. I bolted down the stairs, my legs barely carrying me fast enough, and I ran out of that house like the devil himself was chasing me. I didn't care about the inspection, didn't care about the report. All I knew was that I had seen something that wasn't supposed to be there. When I told my boss about it, he laughed. Said I was probably hallucinating, that old houses like these mess with your head. But this wasn't in my head. I knew what I saw. And I've never been able to forget that scream, that horrible, unearthly scream. It's like it's burned into my brain. After that day, I started questioning everything. Every job, every house I stepped into. I kept seeing shadows where there shouldn't be any, hearing whispers in empty rooms. And now, sitting here in this abandoned house, I can feel it again. That same presence, that same heavy, oppressive energy. It's watching me, waiting for me to make a move. I don't know what it wants, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever I saw in that attic, it hasn't let me go. And maybe it never will. And that's when I started digging into the history of these houses. It wasn't curiosity at first. It was fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. You don't walk into places like that, feel what I felt, and just brush it off as nerves. No, something was wrong. And when I couldn't shake the memories of those places, the mansion, the woman in the attic, I knew I had to figure out what was going on. I couldn't keep pretending I was just imagining it. So I started with the mansion. The one where I saw that faceless figure standing by the window, the one that felt like it wanted me out the moment I stepped inside. Turns out, that place had a story. A dark one. The kind that gets swept under the rug in small towns like mine. A family of 4 had lived there. Parents, 2 kids. But one night, they just vanished. No bodies, no signs of a struggle. They were just gone. The cops did their usual search, questioned the neighbors, put out missing persons reports, but nothing ever came of it. Eventually, the case went cold, and the house was left to rot. Then I looked into the house with the woman in the attic. That one was even worse. Years ago, a woman had lived there with her husband. Abusive bastard, by all accounts. He locked her up in the attic, his own wife, and left her to starve to death. When they found her body, she was nothing but skin and bones, like she'd wasted away over weeks. Alone. Forgotten. The neighbors said they'd heard her screaming, but no one did anything about it. They all just ignored it until it was too late. The more I dug, the more I found. It wasn't just these 2 houses. It was all of them. Every house I'd been sent to inspect had some sort of tragedy tied to it. Violent deaths. Suicides. People disappearing without a trace. They weren't just old, abandoned buildings, they were traps. Places that fed on fear, on the energy of the people who entered them. And I was walking right into their jaws. The weird thing is, none of this was public knowledge. You'd think stories like these would make headlines, that people would know to stay the hell away from places like that. But no. It was like the town had collectively decided to forget. Like they knew something was wrong but didn't want to admit it. And the worst part? Every time I walked into one of those homes, I felt it. That same sensation, like something was waiting for me. Watching me from the shadows, lurking just out of sight. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. It was real. I could feel it. And whatever it was getting stronger. I started having nightmares. At first, they were vague, just flashes of dark rooms, of shadows moving in the corners. But they got worse. Much worse. I'd see the woman in the attic, crying, her back turned to me, and when I tried to help her, she'd let out that scream. That blood-curdling scream that shook me to my core. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest, convinced that something was in the room with me. And sometimes, it was. I'd open my eyes, and there, standing in the corner, would be a shadow. Not moving. Just watching. Waiting. I'd blink, and it would be gone. But the feeling wouldn't leave. That sensation of being watched, of being hunted. It followed me everywhere. At work. At home. Even in the damn grocery store. I couldn't escape it. The worst of it hit me one night, around 3 a.m., when I woke up again from one of those nightmares. This time, I didn't have to blink to see the shadow. It was there, clear as day, standing at the foot of my bed. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I was frozen, just like I had been in that attic, too terrified to do anything. And then, slowly, it leaned in closer. I don't remember what happened after that. I must have passed out from the fear because when I woke up, it was morning, and the thing, whatever it was gone. But the dread, that bone-deep terror, stayed with me. I knew then that it wasn't just about the houses. It was about me. Whatever had been watching me all this time wasn't just tied to those properties. It was following me. Waiting for me to break. And now, I'm starting to think that maybe I'm the next tragedy in this town's dark history. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. This thing, whatever it was eating away at my sanity. The nightmares, the shadows, the suffocating feeling of being watched, I needed answers. And I knew the only way to get them was to go back. Back to where it all started. The mansion. It was a stupid idea, I'll admit that now. Breaking into a house in the dead of night? The same house where I'd seen that faceless figure, the one that had been gnawing at my mind ever since? Yeah, not my brightest move. But I didn't care. I had to know what was really going on, what had been haunting me all these months. So, one night, just after midnight, I went back. I parked a block away, out of sight, and made my way toward the mansion. The place looked even worse than I remembered. Time hadn't been kind, and neither had the weather. The paint was peeling in long, jagged strips, like the house itself was shedding its skin, revealing something darker underneath. The windows were still boarded up, but they didn't feel like they were keeping anything out. More like they were keeping something in. I slipped through a side window that was already cracked open, the wood rotten and brittle. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it again. The air was thick, heavy, like I was walking into a room filled with wet cement. I could feel the house breathing, alive in some twisted way, almost like it had been waiting for me. The shadows crawled along the walls, not like reflections, but like something sentient, something aware. They followed me as I moved, watching, shifting in the corners of my vision. I made my way to the second floor, to the room where I'd first seen that figure. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I couldn't stop. I had to see it again. I had to know. The door was just like I remembered, slightly ajar, creaking with the faintest push. But this time, I didn't need to step inside to feel it. I could hear voices. Whispers. Low, faint, but they were there. Faint, sinister murmurings that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. My skin prickled with dread, but I pushed the door open anyway. And there it was. The figure. Standing by the window, just like before, but this time, it wasn't alone. The room was full of them. Shadows, tall and thin, their faces blank, just like the first one I'd seen. They stood in a circle, surrounding me, their heads slightly tilted like they were studying me, waiting for me to make the first move. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't listen. I was frozen in place, paralyzed by the sheer weight of their presence. And then, the door slammed shut behind me. The whispers grew louder, filling the room, filling my head. They weren't just noises anymore, they were words. Clear, sharp words, each one cutting into me like a blade. "Join us," they said. "You're next." I panicked. My hand slammed against the door, pounding with everything I had, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers became deafening, swirling around me, closing in. I was suffocating, drowning in them. The shadows pressed closer, their blank faces just inches from mine. I could feel their eyes, even though they had none. I could feel their gaze, heavy and cold, pulling me into the darkness. "Join us." The words echoed in my skull, and I screamed. I screamed until my throat burned, until I thought my lungs would burst. And then, just like that, it stopped. The whispers went silent. The shadows vanished. The room was empty. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I was alone. Completely, impossibly alone. I didn't waste any time. I bolted for the door, my legs barely able to carry me down the stairs and out of that godforsaken house. I didn't look back. I couldn't. When I finally got outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap to the face, and I collapsed on the front lawn, gasping for breath. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened, but there was no making sense of it. Not really. I had seen them. The people who had come before me. The ones who had disappeared. They were trapped in that house, consumed by it. The house wasn't just haunted, it fed on people. On their fear. And now, it was coming for me. I don't know how I got home that night. I barely remember the drive. All I know is that whatever I'd stirred up in that mansion, it wasn't done with me. The shadows had followed me, and no matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, I knew they'd find me. The house wasn't just some place filled with bad memories, it was alive. And it wanted me to join them. But I won't. I can't. I've locked myself in my apartment now. The doors are bolted, the windows shut tight. But it doesn't matter. I can feel them. Outside, waiting. Watching. And I know it's only a matter of time. I stopped sleeping. After that night in the mansion, after the whispers and the shadows, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing them. Every time I tried to sleep, they were there, standing over my bed, staring down at me with their blank, faceless expressions. Waiting. Watching. I could feel them, like cold hands pressing against my chest, suffocating me. It wasn't just in my head. I knew that now. The truth had finally clicked. These houses, they weren't just haunted. They were alive. Each one was a living thing, breathing in the dark, feeding on the fear of anyone unlucky enough to cross their threshold. The people who had died there? They never really left. They were absorbed into the walls, becoming part of the house, part of the shadows. And the more I thought about it, the more it all made sense. The whispers, the figures, the things I'd seen, they weren't ghosts. They were the souls of the dead, trapped in these houses, feeding the darkness. And I was next. The moment I walked into that first house, the mansion, it had marked me. I'd felt it even then, that strange pull, like the house knew I was there, knew I was the next victim. The shadows had latched onto me, followed me home, and no matter where I went, they were always there. Watching. Waiting for the right moment to take me. I tried quitting my job. Told my boss I couldn't do it anymore, that I was done with these damn houses. He laughed it off, said I was being dramatic, but I wasn't. I knew the truth now, and I couldn't stay. But it didn't matter. The houses wouldn't let me go. Every time I walked down the street, I could feel their eyes on me, peeking through cracked windows and boarded up doors. They were calling to me, whispering for me to come back, to finish what had started the moment I stepped into that mansion. So I left town. Packed up what little I had and moved far away, thinking that maybe, just maybe, if I put enough distance between me and those places, I could escape. Start fresh. But it didn't work. The shadows followed. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, feeling that same cold dread, knowing they were there, standing in the corners of my new apartment, watching me. It didn't matter how far I ran. I couldn't shake them. The nightmares got worse. I wasn't just seeing shadows in my dreams anymore. I was hearing them, whispering my name, telling me that my time was running out. I was next, just like all the others. I knew what they wanted now. They wanted me to come back. So I did. I went back to the mansion one last time, desperate for answers, desperate to understand what was happening to me. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew the answers were there, buried in that house. It had started there, and it was going to end there, one way or another. The house felt different this time. The air was thicker, heavier, like the house had been waiting for me, like it knew I was coming back. The shadows seemed to move faster, slithering along the walls, creeping just out of sight. I forced myself to keep moving, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts as I made my way through the house. I ended up in the basement. It was darker down there, colder. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like you'll never be warm again. I don't know why I went down there, but something pulled me, some force I couldn't explain. And that's where I found it, the journal. It was old, the pages yellowed and brittle, but the writing was clear. It belonged to the man who had built the house. The more I read, the more the truth started to sink in. The man who had built the mansion had performed rituals, dark, twisted things that bound the souls of those who died in the house to the walls. He'd trapped them there, forced them to stay, their fear feeding the house, keeping it alive. The more people who died, the stronger the house became. It wasn't just a home. It was a prison. A prison for the dead. And now, I was next. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was trapped. The moment I'd stepped into that house, I'd sealed my fate. No matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, the house would find me. It was alive, and it wanted me. I left the mansion that night, but I knew it didn't matter. I wasn't getting away. The house was inside me now, in my head, in my dreams. I'd seen the truth, and there was no escaping it. I'm sitting here, writing this, knowing that it's only a matter of time before they come for me. The shadows are already moving, just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. The houses don't let you go. They never let you go. And soon, I'll be one of them.